We are counting down the 8 best matches in the career of Rey Mysterio on our way to Sound Off 619, which is 1 week away. Next week, we are going to reveal number 2 and number 1, but to get to number 2, we first have to get through number 3. And I teased this match in the mailbag a few weeks ago. I don't know if some people picked up on it when I was talking about some of the greatest Intercontinental Championship matches of all time. Chris Jericho is in the middle of his next, I guess you'd say, phase right now of his career. He's had a lot of phases, Jericho has. Lionheart in ECW and WCW. Conspiracy Theory Jericho with Ralphus. Y2J Chris Jericho. Undisputed Champion Jericho. Jericho and Christian as a tag team. You know, Serious Jericho who wore suits on TV every week and had that great feud with Shawn Michaels. Jericho the Legend Hater, feuding with the likes of Ricky Steamboat and Mickey Rourke, and being mocked on TV by Bob Barker. I could go on and on, right? The list Jericho and his friendship with Kevin Owens, the Jericho who became basically like a Bruiser Brody-style brawler in New Japan, Brawling Jericho. Now Jericho, the bubbly drinking AEW champion. He's had quite the Hall of Fame career. But I don't know that he has had a better period than the period from 2008 to 2009, which saw him have that all-time great feud with Shawn Michaels that played out over a 6-month period. He won the world title during that time. He got a pay-per-view match with Ricky Steamboat, which for him might have been like a bucket list thing. And then he won the Intercontinental Championship during another tremendous feud against Rey Mysterio. And he won the tag team titles with Big Show. And Jericho is still a guilty pleasure of mine. You know, I'm not always a fan of these makeshift tag teams, but Jericho was damn good. Just objectively, a very good team. The feud with Jericho and Mysterio kicked off after Jericho was drafted to SmackDown, which was after WrestleMania 25, and after the Steamboat match at Backlash. So, WrestleMania comes and goes. Jericho beats Ricky Steamboat. SmackDown was in Madison Square Garden on the night that Jericho debuted on the SmackDown brand. He was included that night in a fatal 4-way against Mysterio, Kane, and Jeff Hardy to determine a number 1 contender for Edge's World Heavyweight title. Jericho threw a chair at Rey's face. He was disqualified. Jeff Hardy would go on to pin Mysterio and win the match. And thus, a feud was born. A feud where Jericho became absolutely obsessed over Rey Mysterio's mask and wanting to unmask him for all the world to see. This almost didn't even happen. This entire feud nearly did not happen. According to Jericho, Vince McMahon was not on board with the idea because he just didn't think anybody would want to see an angle built around a mask. He didn't see what the big deal was. It's like, so what? Jericho had to explain to him why the mask meant so much in Lucha Libre, and he had to explain to him in a way that he knew would resonate with Vince McMahon. Because, you know, a guy like Jericho, who's been working for that company since 99, you know, he's one of those people who I'm sure has his personal relationship with Vince McMahon, and he talks about how sometimes they would text each other. I mean, maybe not now, but they had that kind of relationship. And he would have to know, you know, how to pick and choose his battles behind the scenes, how to talk to Vince. You'll learn how to communicate with him, how to speak to him. So he knew that he had to explain it to him in a way that was going to really resonate. So he explained it like this. He said, look, I'm a bully. And for the first time in my career, I'm bigger than somebody. I'm bigger than Rey Mysterio. And I'm going to walk into this kid's class. If he was a student in school, I'm going to walk into this kid's class, and I'm going to steal his milk money. And I'm going to take that money, and I'm going to throw it in the garbage. Because I can. I don't care about the milk money. I just don't want him to have it. So I'm going to take it from him, because that's what bullies do. Basically, I don't give a shit about the mask or him showing his face. Doesn't matter to me. I just want the mask, because I don't want him to have it anymore. And at that point, Vince understood, and he was totally on board with the angle. Jericho sold him on it. Jericho wanted to expose Mysterio as a fraud, and he thought the mask symbolized that lie and the fraud that he thought Rey stood for. So there was one episode of SmackDown in the build-up to their one of their matches. As Rey is walking down the aisle, he would do that thing, the head-to-head, mask-to-mask thing. He'd put his head up against the young fan who was also wearing a mask. So he's doing that deal, and he's doing it with what he thought was a young fan. He turns to walk away, and the fan attacks him. And it turned out to be Chris Jericho. So they had their first match at Judgment Day. Mysterio pinned Jericho to retain the IC title. At Extreme Rules, Jericho beat Mysterio. It was a no-holds-barred match. Jericho became a 9-time Intercontinental Champion. Rey was in the middle of a 619 when Jericho swiped the mask right off his head. Exposed his face. Rey quickly covered his face, put his head in his hands, I guess terrified that he would be outed as a member of the Filthy Animals in WCW. Jericho schoolboyed him, won the title, and he had the title in one hand, he had Rey's mask in the other. It was like a trophy for him. Which leads us to the rubber match at what used to be called the Great American Bash. Now it was, by this point, it was reduced simply to The Bash. I have the honor of having been in attendance for the very last Great American Bash pay-per-view, which was the year before this. Number 3 in the countdown of the best Rey Mysterio matches of all time is Rey Mysterio against Chris Jericho, mask versus title, at the Bash in 2009. This was the best of their series of matches, I thought. Each one was better than the one that came before it. I had so much fun going back and watching this again. I knew this match was going to be on my list. When I made the initial list, and there were a lot more than 8 matches on that initial list, and I had to figure out which ones were going to be cut. But I knew this match would be on here. I just wasn't sure where to rank it. I didn't know where in the top 8 was it going to rank. Was it going to be number 3? Was it going to be number 6? I wasn't sure. Top 3, once I went through everything, top 3 just felt right. We had the odd and very short-lived tag team, announce team of Todd Grisham and Jim Ross, representing SmackDown. Right from the outset, Jericho went straight for the mask. There was a springboard slingshot moonsault in here by Mysterio. There was a Rana attempt off the top that Jericho turned into a powerbomb. So some pretty big moves here in this match. There were a lot of moves that called back to their earlier matches. And then one of the best damn code breakers that you will ever see. Rey springboards off the ropes. Rey hits the ropes. He springboards off the ropes and turns around right into a code breaker. This was a thing of beauty. But Jericho took his time crawling over to make the cover, and Rey kicked out. Rey finally hits the 619. Springboard off the ropes, but Jericho turns it into the walls. The crowd was coming unglued for this. One of the things when you go back and watch this match, and I hope a lot of you are doing that as I go along here in the countdown, because it is pretty fun to go back. Pay attention to the crowd reaction, especially as the match goes on. And when they start reaching kind of the climax of that finishing sequence, the last few minutes of the match, and just how loud and how energetic and into this match these people are. When he put him in the walls, there were parts of this match where the hard cam was shaking. The building was shaking just enough where the hard camera was shaking a little bit, if you watch closely. Jericho did the same thing he did in their Extreme Rules match. He pulled the mask off of Rey's head, but Rey came prepared with a second mask. He was wearing a second mask underneath that one. 619, springboard splash, and Rey Mysterio regains the Intercontinental Championship. Tremendous stuff. Tremendous stuff. When the match ended, because I brought it up on the network with the pay-per-view, when the match ended, they were showing highlights of Donald Trump buying Monday Night Raw. And now, as I sit here 10 years later, I am just reminded of how fucking weird this world really is. Like, where are we? Oh, this would not be the last that we would see of Chris Jericho on this pay-per-view. He came back out a few matches later to team with Edge as a surprise entry in the Unified Tag Team title match against Legacy and the Colognes. Jericho and Edge won the titles, and 5 days later, in a match against Jeff Hardy at a live event, Edge, early in the match, did a simple leapfrog. And when he landed, he tore his Achilles. And he was gone for 6 months. But out of that came Jericho. Big Show and Chris Jericho. So at least something good came out of it. You know, were it not for the classic between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker at WrestleMania that year, this would have been my match of the year for 2009. I know Jeff Hardy and CM Punk had a great TLC match at SummerSlam. Even John Cena and Randy Orton. You know, I joked over the years on the show about how sick to death I am of seeing these two against each other. Because they just had so many freaking matches, and not all of them have been that good either. But two of their best matches came back-to-back in 2009. I was a big fan of the match they had at that Breaking Point pay-per-view. They had an I Quit match. You know, that was the match where Orton cuffed or whatever, tied Cena to the ring post outside and was whacking him with the kendo stick. And then Cena used the kendo stick on Orton's face while he was in the STF to tap him out. So I thought that they had a great match at Breaking Point, which was actually the name of a pay-per-view. It lasted all of 1 year. But that was a great match. And even their Iron Man match. You would think, oh my God, 60 minutes of John Cena and Randy Orton. I was actually a pretty big fan of their Iron Man match. I thought it was very good. I remember liking that one too. But none of these matches were as good as the match here between Jericho and Mysterio. So it all comes down to next week. Episode 619 of the Sound Off will be the end of our countdown featuring the top 2 greatest matches in Rey Mysterio's career. Good luck with the guesses.